I want to talk about two paint techniques very closely related, which I do occasionally on some older models. It's only suitable to do this technique on certain models with raised detail. And I'm not going to recommend the technique because it can be time consuming and sometimes a bit annoying. But it relates to the sanding down of detail, but not sanding all of it away. Now, I have mentioned this a number of times before. This is the first of the Shackletons which I did. The second one is on the go. I'm starting to paint pieces and I'm sort of glad I kept parts separate. But I'm doing more or less the same thing, but enough of a different variation, which I will now speak about. So this one, I sanded down most of the raised detail, and you know that the Shackleton has got terrible, terrible raised detail, with the aim of then painting and then sanding down the last bit of detail. Now, in the past couple of days, I've done a little bit more work, and I've achieved possibly one of my nicest painting results on only a portion of this aeroplane, which is right there. I'll show close up just now. But what's happening on this one is going to be a little bit different from what happens on the second one. And the difference is that this one was then painted with a silver aluminium, airframe aluminium color, gloss coated, then the hairbrush hairspray technique, and then I painted grey, and then I did some chipping. Now the chipping did not work very well at all and was pretty much a mess, but it is present on this model. I've then sprayed more spray over that to cover that over the top chipping, and I'm still busy. There's still a lot to be done on this aircraft. This one doesn't have the silver and doesn't have the hairspray. It has the sanding down to 90% of the raised detail gone, but keeping it, and I'll explain more on that one now. So back to this one. I was interested in doing the chipping as part of my experiments with trying to see what chipping I get on different aircraft. What I did with this one is the layer of paint over the hairspray was a bit too thick, which means I needed to do pretty heavy work to get the chipping to come through, and as a result it came through in heavy chipped parts of paint, if you can see the difference. If you paint pretty thin over your hairspray, when you do water and a bit of brushing or whatever method you use to start getting a bit of paint to be removed because of the dissolving of the hairspray layer, the thinner that paint, the easier that comes away, and of course you get a whole variety of effects from that. Now, I don't intend to use any more water or any more use of that hairspray on this model, but the fact that it has that silver is very important. Now, we'll see if this light can catch that. Okay, so it's a very subtle, and I don't know if you're going to actually catch much of that. This one's the side that's got a bit more. So that little area there which you can see shining is the more obvious of that. But on the other side there's a very subtle view coming through. So that is a light sanding to sand this thin blue-grey layer away, which then went through the other grey layer and back to the silver. So I've got the panel lines coming through and the rivet lines in just a faint enough silver. You don't want it bright, so I've got a very nice subtle effect there. I don't have it present on the wings at all, and I don't have it present anywhere else. In fact, there you can see some of that heavy chipping which will be removed by spraying. So I've still got a lot to do on the underside. On the horizontal stabilizers upper surface, I've done a very light sanding, and I will do a little bit more to try and get some effect. There is a very subtle effect coming through, but on the sides, because I sprayed thinner, it's I think quite nice. So what the effect of that gives is an aircraft which, especially on this larger the larger aircraft, which you want a lot of the feel of the scale. So if it's just got an even color, you don't get much of the feel of the scale. The wings, I've also got quite a nice variation. I've done a fair bit of sanding, but unfortunately not enough of the surface detail remained to actually then come through with the sanding. Here and there a little spot, there's something interesting there, but it's very difficult to bring it through on here. So on this one, I've left more detail, but I don't want to sand it off yet because I first want to do all of my effects. And as I said, I don't have the silver, so all that's going to happen when I sand that is I'm going to get rid of a little bit more relief, but I am going to get the plastic color coming through. So you're going to get a feel for the rivets. You're gonna see a difference, but it's just not going to be silver. We'll see how that turns out. I think it'll be quite nice, except that this plastic is gray and that paint is gray, so I'm not that sure. I should have actually done a different color first. Maybe not silver, maybe a light gray. On the other hand, interesting effects can be achieved. We'll see. So I like the idea, and I think it's worth trying sometimes, where your aircraft is ready for spraying, but you first spray the whole thing some sort of metal color, aluminium, silver, doesn't really matter. And you don't want too much of that to come through. You could even go light gray, I guess, because it's not going to be that shininess in your eye. But on this one, I think it's toned down enough due to the other gray, even on this slightly larger section which comes through over there. And it's still going to get a bit more weathering on it. But it does give that feel of an aircraft that's been outside and used for so long without being repainted that it's you know, the paint is pretty deteriorated, which I think for a Shackleton works quite well. Not an in-service Shackleton, but a Shackleton that has been kept going by a museum and not repainted recently. Then painting your color, I don't think you need to do the hairspray for that. Painting a variety of base colors, not too thickly, with the idea that a very light sanding in line with the airflow. So if I hold this at a distance, you will see that a lot of the striping is always in line with the airflow. It gives you your rivet lines, it gives you your raised panel line, gets rid of a lot of that raised detail, and yet gives you all of your interest on the wing that you want and on the fuselage. So if you try it, I'd be interested to see pics of what you do. This one, as I said, I think I got a little bit carried away and I actually ended up sanding too smooth. So the fuselage has lost just about all of its detail that I was going to achieve. This one I've managed to keep, I think, the right amount. So as the second one develops, we'll see how that turns out. Now, I should just add, how interesting is it to build this old frog kit? And I have to say it's borderline frustrating, because it is such an old kit with such fit problems and so on that, you know, you sort of have to have a good reason to do it. You know, there's sinkholes which I haven't filled there. I filled some sinkholes, but it was just too much. It's good enough to make a model out of, but if you want to make a nice model out of it, it's just a ridiculous amount of work. I mean, why would you want to when you've got far better quality kits, even though it might not be exactly the mark of aircraft that you want. Anyway, give me your thoughts on that sanding technique for details. I do use it on Airfix occasionally. I don't build a whole lot of frog, and I think that's really all that is suitable for that, because it mostly works very nicely on these lines of rivets which Airfix provided. Okay, happy modeling. Cheers.